The message arrived on every communication channel across human space. It was formal, ancient in structure, and carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic dominance. The Kaldrith Imperium, rulers of the known galaxy, had issued a declaration of war against the Terran Confederacy. Admiral Zekthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His four eyes gleamed with confidence as he watched the transmission being sent. The Kaldrith had conquered 47 civilizations over the centuries. Each one had responded the same way to such a declaration. They begged. They pleaded. They offered tribute. And when that failed, they fought desperately and died quickly. The humans would be no different. They were young, barely 300 years into space travel. They had colonized only 200 systems. The Kaldrith controlled 10,000. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was certain. On Earth, in the Terran Defense Council chambers, the message played on the central screen. The council members sat in silence as Admiral Zekthor's translated words echoed through the room. The Kaldrith Imperium finds the Terran Confederacy in violation of territorial boundaries. You have expanded into systems claimed by the Imperium, since before your species looked to the stars. We offer you this choice: immediate surrender and vassalage or ritual combat, fleet against fleet at the neutral zone. You have one standard galactic week to respond. The screen went dark. The silence continued for exactly 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. It was a small sound at first, coming from one of the junior officers. Then another person chuckled. Within moments, the entire council chamber filled with laughter. Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the Terran fleet, stood up. Her face wore a smile that would have frightened anyone who knew her well. "Gentlemen, ladies," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "They just gave us permission." "Permission for what?" asked Councillor Martinez, though his own smile suggested he already knew. "Permission to stop playing nice," Chen replied. She turned to her staff officers. "Send acceptance of their challenge. Fleet combat at the neutral zone will be there in 1 week." She paused, her smile growing wider. "And gentlemen, break out the doctrine manuals. The old ones, the ones marked Total War." The staff officers grinned. One of them actually saluted with genuine enthusiasm. Across the galaxy, other species watched the exchange with growing concern. The Galactic Council, a loose organization of neutral powers, convened an emergency session. The Kaldrith had always won. Always. 47 times they had issued such challenges. 47 times they had crushed their opponents. Ambassador Tavel of the Machian Union addressed the council. "The humans do not understand what they face. The Kaldrith Armada is the most powerful military force in known space. Perhaps we should offer to mediate." "The humans were offered surrender," replied Ambassador Kree of the Vothan Republic. "They chose combat. There is nothing to mediate." "But they are so young," Tavel insisted. "They cannot possibly understand the power they are challenging. Their largest fleet action was against the Sindari pirates. That was barely 200 ships. The Kaldrith will bring thousands." The council chamber fell silent. They all knew what was coming. Another civilization would fall. Another species would be absorbed into the Kaldrith Imperium or destroyed entirely. The humans, for all their energy and optimism, would learn the hard lesson that every other young species had learned. The galaxy was not kind to the weak, but something bothered Ambassador Kree. Something in the human response was wrong. She had studied the humans during their expansion. They were cautious, careful. They had avoided conflicts with established powers. They had negotiated rather than fought whenever possible. Their military doctrine emphasized defense and minimal casualties. So why were they smiling? In the Terran military headquarters on Mars, officers pulled dusty files from secure archives. These were documents that had not been opened in generations. Plans and strategies that had been deemed too brutal, too savage, too total for the diplomatic approach humanity had chosen when joining galactic civilization. One file was labeled Sherman, Protocol. Another read, Strategic Bombing Doctrine. Third was marked Unrestricted Warfare, Historical. Reference only. The officers read through the documents with growing excitement. These were the strategies that had won wars on Earth. These were the tactics that humanity had promised the galaxy they would never use. Until now. "Admiral." Chen addressed her fleet commanders via secure channel. For 300 years we have played by the rules. We have been the good neighbors, the peaceful explorers. We have fought only in self-defense and always with one hand tied behind our backs. The Confederacy Council required it. The Diplomatic Corps demanded it. We agreed because we wanted to be members of galactic civilization. She paused, and her smile could be heard in her voice. The Kaldrith just issued a formal challenge to ritual combat. No rules, no restrictions. Fleet against fleet until one side surrenders or is destroyed. They thought this would terrify us. They thought we would beg for mercy. Another pause. They have no idea what they just did. They have given us permission to take off the leash. They have invited Earth to show them what we really are. Gentlemen, ladies, we are going to give them a lesson in human warfare. Real human warfare. The kind our ancestors perfected over 10,000 years of killing each other. The fleet commanders cheered. It was not a polite sound. It was the sound of predators finally allowed to hunt. On the Kaldrith homeworld, Admiral Zekthor received the human acceptance of his challenge. He read it once, then twice, confused by the tone. There was no desperation, no pleading. The message was simple and direct. Challenge accepted. We will meet you at the designated coordinates in one standard week. Bring your best. You're going to need it. Zekthor dismissed the message as bravado, empty words from a species about to learn the price of arrogance. He began assembling his armada. 5,000 warships, the largest fleet the Kaldrith had ever gathered. It would be glorious. It would be overwhelming. It would be quick. He had no idea that across human space officers were toasting each other with champagne. Pilots were painting new symbols on their fighters. Marines were sharpening blades that had never been meant for ceremonial use. Engineers were loading weapons that had been built but never deployed. Humanity was going to war. Real war, total war. The kind of war that had nearly destroyed Earth a dozen times. The kind of war that humans had spent 300 years promising they would never fight again. The Kaldrith had given them permission, and humanity was smiling. The neutral zone hung in space like a wound in the galaxy. It was empty space claimed by no one, bordered by the territories of a dozen civilizations. The perfect place for ritual combat. The perfect place to die. Admiral Zekthor stood on his bridge and watched his fleet assemble. 5,000 warships, dreadnoughts that could crack planets, cruisers that had burned entire civilizations, destroyers that moved through space like hungry predators. The largest armada the Kaldrith Imperium had ever gathered in one place. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. It was absolute. Report, Zekthor commanded. All ships in position, Admiral. His tactical officer responded. 5,000 warships ready for combat. Long-range sensors show the human fleet approaching. How many ships? Zekthor asked. 800, Admiral. Zekthor felt a moment of disappointment. 800 ships against 5,000. The humans had not even brought their full fleet. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. Perhaps they had already given up. Perhaps they were coming to formally surrender before the fighting began. Activate all viewing channels, he ordered. Let the galaxy watch. Let them see what happens to those who challenge the Kaldrith. Across known space, billions watched. Every species with the technology to receive the broadcast tuned in. The Galactic Council watched from their neutral station. Diplomats, scholars, military officers, ordinary citizens. Everyone wanted to see the end of the human experiment. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 800 ships arranged in neat geometric patterns. They were smaller than the Kaldrith vessels, built for speed and efficiency rather than raw power. They looked fragile next to the massive Kaldrith dreadnoughts. But something was wrong. Admiral, the Kaldrith tactical officer said, confusion in his voice. The human ships are broadcasting on all frequencies. Surrender terms? Zekthor asked hopefully. No, sir. They are broadcasting music. Zekthor listened. The sounds were harsh and rhythmic. Drums and guitars and voices singing in the human language. The translation software struggled to make sense of the words. Something about fortunate sons and senators. Another song about helicopters and mourning. A third was just a long building series of notes that sounded like something rising from the depths. Turn it off, Zekthor ordered, disturbed by the strange sounds. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, the Indomitable, Admiral Sarah Chen smiled as the music played. Old songs from old wars. Her grandfather had fought in the Unification Wars. Her great-grandmother had served in the Pacific. The songs were tradition. The songs were history. The songs were a promise. All ships report ready, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Status of the Kaldrith fleet? 5,000 ships in standard attack formation. They are waiting for us to either surrender or engage. Chen's smile grew wider. Tactical, load the special munitions. Engineering, bring all reactors to full power. Communications, send a message to the Kaldrith flagship. Message ready, Admiral. Tell them we accept their challenge. Tell them we hope they brought enough ships. She paused. And tell them welcome to Earth's war. The message was sent. The Kaldrith received it. Zekthor read it and felt the first small doubt creep into his mind. The tone was wrong. The words were wrong. Where was the fear? Where was the desperate hope for mercy? Begin attack formation, he ordered, pushing the doubt away. Overwhelming wave. Standard doctrine. We crush them with numbers. The Kaldrith fleet began to move, 5,000 ships advancing in perfect coordination. It was a sight that had broken the spirits of 47 civilizations. A wall of death moving through space. The human fleet did not retreat. They did not scatter. They did not even move into defensive positions. They accelerated forward, directly into the Kaldrith formation. On the Galactic Council observation station, Ambassador Kree leaned forward. What are they doing? She whispered. They are attacking, Ambassador Tavel said, his voice filled with horror. They are outnumbered 6-1 and they are attacking. Madness, another ambassador muttered. But Kree was not so sure. She had studied humans. She had read their history. She knew what they had done to each other before they reached the stars. Wars that lasted years. Weapons that could destroy entire planets. Strategies that sacrificed millions to achieve victory. She remembered a phrase from human history. Something a human general had said long ago. War is not about who is right. War is about who is left. The fleets collided. The Kaldrith opened fire first. Energy weapons that could melt ship hulls. Missiles that tracked their targets across light seconds. Point defense systems that could intercept incoming fire. Standard galactic warfare. Proven tactics. Overwhelming firepower. The humans returned fire with weapons the Kaldrith had never seen. Kinetic rounds accelerated to impossible speeds. Nuclear-tipped missiles that ignored shields. Electromagnetic pulses that fried ship systems. Lasers that cut through armor like paper. And then the humans did something that made every observer stop breathing. They rammed the Kaldrith ships. Not accidentally. Not as a last resort, deliberately. Human destroyers accelerated to maximum speed and crashed into Kaldrith cruisers. Human frigates sacrificed themselves to take out Kaldrith dreadnoughts. Ship after ship, crew after crew, throwing themselves at the enemy with the force of guided missiles. By the void, Zekthor breathed. They are using their ships as weapons. Admiral, we are losing vessels, his tactical officer reported. The collisions are destroying our shields. Their kinetic attacks are too fast to intercept. We have lost over 200 ships. How many humans have we destroyed? Approximately 50, Admiral. 50 human ships for 200 Kaldrith vessels. The mathematics had reversed. The equation had changed. This was not how galactic warfare worked. On the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Kaldrith shields were designed for energy weapons. Beautiful, efficient, perfect for stopping lasers and plasma. Completely inadequate against a 10,000-ton destroyer moving at 30,000 kilometers per second. Physics was a harsh teacher. Launch the swarm, she ordered. From the human carriers, thousands of small drones emerged. They were tiny compared to the warships around them. Cheap. Simple. Each one carried a nuclear warhead and a basic guidance system. Each one cost less than a single energy weapon on a Kaldrith cruiser, and there were 10,000 of them. The Kaldrith point defense systems opened fire. They destroyed hundreds of drones, then thousands, but for every drone they destroyed, 10 more got through. The Kaldrith had never seen such tactics. No civilized species would use weapons like this. No rational military would waste resources on disposable attack drones. But humans were not playing by civilized rules. Humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently, and now they were teaching the galaxy what that really meant. Explosions blossomed across the Kaldrith formation. Nuclear fire in the void. Ships died by the dozens. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos. The overwhelming wave became a scattered mess of damaged vessels and panicked commanders. Admiral, the Kaldrith tactical officer screamed. We have lost over 800 ships. They are cutting through us. Zekthor stared at the display in disbelief. This was impossible. They outnumbered the humans. They had superior technology. They had 1,000 years of military tradition. How are they losing? Then he understood. The humans were not fighting a civilized war. They were fighting their kind of war. The kind where there were no rules. No limits, no mercy. The kind where victory was the only thing that mattered. The kind of war the Kaldreth had invited by issuing their challenge. All ships, he ordered, his voice shaking. Begin retreat. Fall back to... The communication system crackled. Admiral Chen's voice came through, translated into Kaldreth. Retreat? She said, and Zekthor could hear the smile in her voice. No one said you could leave. You wanted ritual combat. You wanted to teach us a lesson. So sit down. Class is still in session. The human fleet pursued. And the Kaldreth, for the first time in their 1,000-year history, learned what it meant to be prey. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. 6 hours that had changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Admiral Zekthor watched his fleet die. The tactical display showed the truth in cold, merciless numbers. Of the 5,000 ships he had brought to the neutral zone, only 3,800 remained. And that number was dropping by the minute. The humans had lost nearly 300 ships. 300 against 1,200. By any standard galactic calculation, they should have been destroyed. But humans did not calculate the way other species did. They did not measure victory in ships preserved. They measured it in objectives achieved, and their objective was simple: destroy the Kaldreth fleet. Admiral, we must retreat, the tactical officer pleaded. We have lost too many ships. The humans are using tactics we cannot counter. If we stay, we will all die, Zekthor wanted to agree. Every military instinct told him to fall back, regroup, analyze the enemy tactics, and develop a proper response. That was how wars were supposed to be fought. That was how civilized species conducted combat. But the humans would not let them leave. Prepare for emergency faster-than-light jump, Zekthor ordered. All ships a scatter formation and retreat to Rally Point Gamma. The order went out. The Kaldreth fleet began to break formation, ships turning to flee into the safety of faster-than-light travel. It was a retreat. It was defeat. But it was survival. Then the humans showed them something new. Human destroyers moving at impossible speeds positioned themselves along the Kaldreth retreat vectors. They were not trying to block the escape. They were waiting for it. As the first Kaldreth ships began their faster-than-light jumps, the human ships fired. Not energy weapons. Not missiles. Something else. Something that warped space itself. What are they using? Zekthor demanded. Analyzing. Admiral, they are deploying gravity mines. Weapons that create artificial gravity wells. They are trapping our ships in normal space. Kaldreth vessels trying to jump away found themselves pulled back into normal space by invisible hands. Their faster-than-light drive strained against the gravity wells and failed. Ships that had been seconds from escape became sitting targets. The human fleet moved in for the kill. On the Galactic Council observation station, the ambassadors watched in stunned silence. The humans had just deployed a weapon that should not exist. Artificial gravity wells were theoretically possible, but no one had ever developed them. They were too unstable, too dangerous, too expensive. Ambassador Kree finally understood. They did not develop those weapons yesterday, she said quietly. They have had them for decades, maybe centuries. They simply never used them. Why? Ambassador Tavel asked. Why develop weapons and never use them? Because they promised us they would not, Kree replied. When they joined galactic civilization, they agreed to follow our standards of warfare. They agreed to fight defensively. They agreed to minimize casualties. They kept that promise for 300 years. She paused, until the Kaldreth gave them permission to stop. The watching ambassadors understood then. The humans had been holding back. For 3 centuries, they had been playing by rules that limited their true capabilities. The galaxy had mistaken restraint for weakness. It was a mistake they would never make again. In the battle zone, Commander Marcus Webb piloted his frigate, the Tenacious, toward a Kaldreth carrier. His ship was damaged. Half his crew was dead. His engines were failing. By all rational measures, he should retreat to the support ships and await rescue. Instead, he calculated a collision course. Commander, what are you doing? His surviving bridge officer asked. Winning, Webb replied with a grim smile. Tell everyone to get to the escape pods. You have 30 seconds. Sir, there are not enough pods for everyone, then you better hurry. Webb locked the navigation controls. I will stay with the ship. His crew evacuated. Webb watched them go, knowing some would not make it. Knowing he would not make it. It did not matter. What mattered was the Kuldrith carrier ahead. What mattered was the mission. The Tenacious accelerated to maximum speed. Webb diverted all power to the engines. The ship groaned and shook. Metal screaming under stress it was never designed to handle. The carrier loomed ahead, huge and terrible and doomed. Webb's final transmission reached the human fleet. Tell my kids their dad went out like a Viking. Also, did you see that explosion? It was perfect. The Tenacious struck the carrier at 35,000 kilometers per second. The impact released energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. The carrier was not just destroyed. It was obliterated. Pieces of both ships scattered across 1,000 kilometers of space. On the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the explosion and nodded in respect. Webb had been a good officer. A good friend. His sacrifice had taken out a ship carrying 2,000 enemy fighters. The mathematics were cold. 1 man for 2,000 fighters. By human calculations, it was an acceptable trade. By galactic standards, it was insanity. Admiral Zekthor is attempting to contact us, the communications officer reported. Put him through, Chen ordered. The Kuldrith Admiral appeared on the screen. He looked like he had aged a decade in the last 6 hours. His 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been fear or might have been respect. Admiral Chen, Zekthor said, his voice carefully controlled. I wish to discuss terms. Terms? Chen raised an eyebrow. You issued a challenge. Ritual combat. No terms were mentioned. No surrender conditions were established. You wanted to fight until one side was destroyed. So let us continue. You have made your point, Zekthor said. You are formidable opponents. More than we anticipated. But continuing this battle benefits no one. We can both retreat and— Retreat? Chen interrupted, her voice ice cold. Admiral, you came here with 5,000 ships to teach humanity a lesson. You wanted to show us the price of challenging the Kuldrith. You wanted the galaxy to watch us beg for mercy. She leaned forward. So here is the lesson we will teach you instead. When you start a war with humans, you better be prepared to finish it, because we will. She cut the transmission. Resume attack, she ordered. All ships, no mercy. Show them what human warfare really means. The human fleet surged forward. Human marines in armored exosuits boarded damaged Kuldrith vessels. Fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors, human pilots flew their fighters into impossible positions, sacrificing shield power for weapon energy. Human engineers diverted reactor cores into overload, turning their own ships into improvised bombs. It was not elegant. It was not civilized. It was not the kind of warfare taught in galactic military academies. It was human, and it was devastating. The Kuldrith fought back with everything they had. They were not cowards. They were not weak. They were warriors with 1,000 years of military tradition. But tradition meant nothing against an enemy that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. By the 8th hour, the Kuldrith fleet had been reduced to 2,200 ships. The human fleet numbered 500. By the 10th hour, the Kuldrith had 1,500 ships. The humans had 350. The mathematics were clear. The humans were winning, not because they had better technology, not because they had superior numbers, but because they were willing to pay a price that no civilized species would accept. They were willing to die to win. Admiral, Zekthor's tactical officer said quietly, we have lost 60% of our fleet. At this rate, we will be completely destroyed within 4 more hours. Zekthor stared at the tactical display. He had led the Kuldrith to victory 47 times. He had conquered worlds. He had destroyed civilizations. He had been confident of victory when he arrived here. Now he understood. The humans were not like other species. They were not civilized in the way the galaxy understood civilization. They were predators who had learned to wear the mask of diplomacy. And the Kuldrith had given them permission to take that mask off. Send a message to the homeworld, he ordered quietly. Tell them we have failed. Tell them the humans are not what we thought. Tell them, he paused, tell them to prepare for what comes next. Because Zekthor knew, even if his superiors did not yet understand, that this battle was not the end. It was the beginning. The humans would not stop at the neutral zone. They had tasted blood. They had been given permission for unrestricted warfare, and they were smiling. The battle at the neutral zone ended after 14 hours. Of the 5,000 Kaldrith ships that had arrived, 700 limped away. Of the 800 human ships, 180 remained functional. By any civilized standard, both sides had lost. By human standards, the Terran Confederacy had won. Admiral Zekthor sat on his bridge and stared at the tactical display. The remaining Kaldrith ships were scattered across 3 systems trying to regroup. They had run. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Kaldrith Imperium had retreated from battle. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "the homeworld is demanding a report." Zekthor took a deep breath. "Tell them we engaged the human fleet. Tell them we lost 4,300 ships. Tell them." He paused. "Tell them the humans are coming." "Coming where, Admiral?" "Everywhere." He was right. On the Indomitable, Admiral Chen addressed what remained of her fleet. The ships were battered. The crews were exhausted. They had fought for 14 hours without rest, without retreat, without mercy, and they were ready for more. "Excellent work," Chen said. "We have shown the Kaldrith what happens when they challenge humanity. But we are not finished." The Kaldrith issued a formal declaration of war. They did not specify conditions for peace. They simply assumed we would surrender or die. She smiled. They were wrong. So now we teach them the full lesson. "What are your orders, Admiral?" her second-in-command asked. "We pursue. We have their retreat vectors. We know where they are going. We follow them back to their territory and we show them that declaring war on humanity has consequences." She looked at her officers. "Plot courses for Kaldrith space. We are taking the war to them." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 200 civilizations gathered to discuss what they had just witnessed. The mood was tense, frightened. No one had expected the humans to win. Ambassador Kree stood to address the council. "The humans have defeated the Kaldrith fleet in open combat. This is unprecedented. The Kaldrith have dominated this galaxy for a millennium. Now they have been broken by a species that has been in space for only 3 centuries. What do the humans want?" another ambassador asked. "Will they accept the Kaldrith surrender?" "The Kaldrith have not surrendered," Kree replied. "They retreated. There is a difference. The war continues." "Then we must mediate," Ambassador Tavel insisted. "We cannot allow this conflict to continue. The humans have proven their point. The Kaldrith have learned their lesson. Both sides should agree to peace." "You do not understand," Kree said quietly. "The humans are not fighting to prove a point, they are fighting to win. And in human terms, winning means total victory. The Kaldrith declared war without conditions. The humans are going to finish that war the same way." The council chamber fell silent. Everyone present had studied the battle. Everyone had seen what human warfare looked like when the restrictions were removed. Ships used as weapons, crews sacrificing themselves, tactics that violated every standard of civilized combat. If the humans brought that kind of war to Kaldrith space, the results would be catastrophic. "We must try to negotiate," Tavel said desperately. "We cannot simply stand by while..." "While what?" another ambassador interrupted. "While the humans destroy the Kaldrith. The same Kaldrith who have conquered 47 civilizations. The same Kaldrith who have subjugated billions. Perhaps the galaxy is better off if the humans finish what the Kaldrith started." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many of the species present had lost territory to the Kaldrith over the centuries. Many had friends or allies who had been absorbed into the Imperium. The Kaldrith had been the dominant power for so long that everyone had accepted it as inevitable, but the humans had changed that equation. 3 days after the battle at the neutral zone, the human fleet arrived at the edge of Kaldrith space. They had pursued the retreating ships across 5 systems. They had given the enemy no time to rest, no time to repair, no time to reorganize. It was classic human strategy. Pursuit to exhaustion. Grant's tactics against Lee. Zhukov's pursuit of the Wehrmacht. Relentless pressure until the enemy collapsed. The Kaldrith homeworld of Kaldros Prime prepared for the worst. They mobilized their reserve fleet. 10,000 ships, every vessel that could fly, every weapon that could fire. The entire home defense force gathered in orbit around their world. Emperor Thaxkor addressed his military commanders. He was old, even by Kaldrith standards. He had ruled for 200 years. He had overseen the conquest of 12 civilizations. He had never imagined he would see enemy ships in orbit of his homeworld. "How many human ships are approaching?" he asked. "Less than 200, Your Majesty," the fleet coordinator replied. "They are outnumbered 50 to 1. "That is what we thought at the neutral zone," Admiral Zekthor said quietly. He had returned to the homeworld ahead of the human fleet. "Numbers mean nothing to them. They will sacrifice every ship if it means destroying us. Then we will destroy them first," Thaxkor declared. "We have 10,000 ships, we have planetary shields, we have orbital defense platforms. They cannot possibly—" The alarm interrupted him. The human fleet had arrived. 180. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were battered, scarred. Some were leaking atmosphere, but they were here, and they were ready. Admiral Chen broadcast a message on all frequencies. It was simple, direct, terrifying in its implications. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederacy to the Kaldrith Imperium. You declared war on humanity. You challenged our fleet, you lost. Now we are here to finish what you started. You have 72 hours to evacuate all civilians from Kaldros Prime. After that, we will consider anyone remaining to be a military target." The message ended. The silence that followed was absolute. "They cannot be serious," one of the Kaldrith commanders said. "They are outnumbered. They cannot possibly attack a defended planet." "They are completely serious," Zekthor replied. "And they can attack. They will attack. The question is not whether they will do it. The question is what they brought to do it with." On Earth, military historians watched the situation unfold with a mixture of pride and horror. They knew what was coming. They had seen it before in human history. Total war. The kind where civilian and military targets blurred together. The kind where entire cities burned. One historian, Professor Maria Santos, gave an interview that was broadcast across human space. "People are asking what the fleet will do when the 72 hours expire," she said. "The answer is simple. They will do what Sherman did to Atlanta, what Curtis LeMay did to Tokyo, what humanity has always done when backed into a corner and given no choice but total victory." She paused. "They will show the Kaldrith that there are things worse than defeat." On Kaldros Prime, panic spread. Billions tried to evacuate. Ships designed for cargo were loaded with refugees. Transports meant for military use carried families. The 72-hour countdown had begun. But Emperor Thaxkor refused to abandon his world. He refused to show weakness. He ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. 10,000 ships against 180. The odds were overwhelming. But Zekthor had seen what humans could do with overwhelming odds. He knew those numbers meant nothing. On the Indomitable, Admiral Chen prepared for the final phase. Her fleet had been reinforced. Fresh supplies had arrived from human territory. And most importantly, they had brought something from Earth. Something that had been built centuries ago but never used in warfare. Something the military called kinetic bombardment. Something everyone else called exactly what it was. "Status of the orbital platforms?" Chen asked. "Deployment complete, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "We have 300 platforms in high orbit. Each platform carries 50 rods. Each rod weighs 10 tons and is made of solid tungsten." Chen nodded. The math was simple. 10 tons of tungsten dropped from orbital altitude would hit the surface at several kilometers per second. The kinetic energy would be equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. 300 platforms with 50 rods each meant 15,000 strikes. 15,000 artificial meteorites that could not be stopped by shields or point defense. Just pure physics and gravity doing what they did best. "The Kaldrith call them the rods from God," her second-in-command said quietly. "That is appropriate," Chen replied. Because we are about to rain judgment on them. The 72 hours ticked down. The galaxy watched. The Kuldrith prepared for a battle they could not win. And humanity waited with the patience of a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to wage war. The countdown reached 0. Admiral Chen gave the order. Deploy the rods. And humanity showed the galaxy what it meant to challenge them. The first rod fell at exactly 0 hour. It was a simple thing. 10 tons of tungsten alloy shaped like a telephone pole. No explosives, no guidance system beyond basic targeting, just metal and gravity and physics. It entered the atmosphere of Kaldros Prime at 7 kilometers per second. Friction heated it to incandescence. The rod became a falling star, visible from half the planet. Beautiful, deadly, unstoppable. It struck a military command bunker buried 300 meters underground. The impact released energy equivalent to 11 tons of conventional explosives. The bunker and everything in it vaporized. The shockwave cracked the ground for kilometers. The sound was like thunder from an angry god. Then the second rod fell. And the third. And the fourth. The bombardment had begun. In orbit, the Kuldrith Home Defense Fleet tried to intercept the falling rods. Energy weapons heated them but could not stop them. Missiles exploded uselessly against solid tungsten. Point defense systems tracked them, but could not destroy them fast enough. For every rod they stopped, 10 more got through. The Kuldrith had designed their defenses to stop ships and missiles. They had never imagined an enemy would simply drop metal from orbit and let gravity do the work. It was simple. It was brutal. It was horrifyingly effective. Emperor Thaxkor watched from his command center as the bombardment destroyed his military infrastructure. Orbital defense platforms, communication arrays, weapons factories, troop staging areas, each target hit with precision, each strike devastating. Deploy the fleet, he ordered. Attack the human ships. They cannot bombard us if they are fighting for survival. The Kuldrith Home Defense Fleet engaged. 10,000 ships against 180. The battle that followed was savage. Human ships fought with the same tactics they had used at the neutral zone. Kinetic weapons, nuclear missiles, kamikaze runs. They were outnumbered 50-1 and they fought like demons. But this time the Kuldrith had learned. They spread their formation. They kept their distance. They used their superior numbers to surround and isolate human vessels. The humans were winning the ground war but losing the space battle, which was exactly what Admiral Chen had expected. Phase 2, she ordered calmly. Launch the stealth packages. From the human carriers, small objects ejected into space. They were not ships. They were not missiles. They were mines. Thousands of them. Each one painted black. Each one running silent. Each one drifting on ballistic trajectories that would take them directly into Kuldrith formations. The Kuldrith did not detect them until it was too late. The mines were simple devices. Proximity sensors. Nuclear warheads. No active systems to track. Just patient death waiting in the void. The first mine detonated inside a cluster of Kuldrith cruisers. The nuclear explosion destroyed 6 ships instantly. Then another mine went off, and another. Across the battlefield, the space between ships became a minefield. The Kuldrith formation collapsed into chaos as vessels tried to avoid the invisible weapons drifting among them. The human fleet pressed their advantage. They knew where the mines were. They had placed them. They flew through the gaps in the field and struck at the disorganized Kuldrith ships. It was like hunting prey that had stumbled into a trap. On the Galactic Council observation station, Ambassador Kree watched the battle in silence. She finally understood. The humans were not just warriors. They were not just brave or determined or willing to die. They were something more fundamental. They were predators, ancient hunters who had learned to use tools. Every human tactic was a trap. Every human strategy was an ambush. They fought the way their ancestors had hunted on ancient Earth, with patience, with cunning, with an absolute refusal to give up. The Kuldrith had thought they were facing a civilized species. They were wrong. They were facing Earth's most successful predator, and humanity had been killing for a very long time. On Kaldros Prime, Emperor Thaxkor received the casualty reports. His home defense fleet was being destroyed. His planet was being bombarded. His empire was collapsing. He had 2 choices: Continue fighting until everything was destroyed or surrender. Pride demanded he fight to the end. Wisdom demanded he save what remained of his people. For the first time in his 200 years of rule, Thaxcor chose wisdom over pride. Contact the human fleet, he ordered quietly. Inform them we wish to discuss surrender terms. The message reached the Indomitable. Admiral Chen read it and nodded. She had expected this. Every enemy eventually realized they could not win. The question was always whether they realized it before being completely destroyed. Cease bombardment, she ordered. All ships, defensive positions. Open a channel to Emperor Thaxcor. The Emperor's face appeared on her screen. He looked old and broken, defeated not just in battle but in spirit. Admiral Chen, he said, we surrender. We accept that we have lost. Please, no more destruction. We will agree to any terms. Chen looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke. The Terran Confederacy accepts your surrender. Our terms are as follows. Complete disarmament of all military forces. Dismantling of all offensive weapons. Payment of reparations for our losses. Public acknowledgement that the Kaldrith Imperium initiated this war and was defeated. She paused. And one more thing. What? Thaxcor asked. Your empire conquered 47 civilizations. Those civilizations will be given independence. The Kaldrith will release all subject species and territories. You will oversee the transition personally to ensure it is done peacefully. Thaxcor stared at her. To agree meant the end of the Kaldrith Imperium. Everything his ancestors had built would be dismantled. But to refuse meant total destruction. We accept, he said quietly. The war ended, not with a glorious final battle, but with a defeated emperor agreeing to terms. The human fleet withdrew to a safe distance and waited while the Kaldrith began the process of dismantling their empire. The galaxy watched in shock. In less than 1 month, humanity had destroyed the greatest military power in known space. They had done it with 800 ships against 15,000. They had done it with tactics that violated every standard of civilized warfare. They had done it because the Kaldrith had given them permission to fight without restrictions. The Galactic Council convened to discuss the new reality. Humanity was now the dominant military power in the galaxy. The question was what they would do with that power. Ambassador Kree proposed a new treaty. It was simple, direct. We propose the Terra Accords. All galactic civilizations agree to the following. Never provoke humanity to total war. Never issue challenges without considering the consequences. Never mistake human restraint for human weakness. Well, she paused. Because we have all seen what happens when humanity stops restraining itself. The vote was unanimous. 200 civilizations signed the Terra Accords within 1 week. The message was clear. Humanity was welcome in galactic civilization. Humanity was respected. But humanity was also feared, and that fear was healthy. On Earth, Admiral Chen retired to write her memoirs. The book was simple and direct, like everything about her. The title said it all. We tried to warn you. In the introduction, she wrote, For 300 years, humanity played by the rules. We fought defensively. We minimized casualties. We negotiated rather than conquered. We did this not because we were weak, but because we were trying to be better than our history. We were trying to prove we could be civilized. The Kaldrith looked at our restraint and saw weakness. They challenged us. They gave us permission to stop holding back. They learned what every human already knows. We are very good at being civilized, but we are much, much better at war. The book became required reading at every military academy in the galaxy, not as a guide to human tactics, but as a warning, a reminder that some species carried their history with them. Some species never forgot how to hunt. Some species only pretended to be civilized, and humanity was one of them. 5 years later, on the far side of the galaxy, a new empire began to rise. The Vraxian hegemony was aggressive and expanding. They conquered their neighbors with ruthless efficiency. They studied galactic history and saw humanity as a target, just another species to be defeated. A Vraxian war council convened to plan their expansion. They identified human territory as weak and overextended. They prepared to issue a challenge. Formal ritual combat, the same kind that had worked against dozens of other species. In the council chamber, one voice spoke up. It was a refugee from Kaldrith space who had fled to Vraxian territory years ago. He had seen the war. He had survived it. He knew what the Vraxians were about to do. Please, the Kaldrith refugee begged. Do not challenge them. You do not understand what you are facing. They are not like other species. The Vraxian commander cut him off, dismissed his warnings as cowardice, ordered the challenge to be sent to human space. The Kaldrith refugee watched them make the same mistake his people had made. He whispered to himself, knowing no one would listen. Knowing it was too late, oh no! Oh, you poor fools. Across human space, military communication channels lit up with the news. Another empire had issued a challenge. Another species wanted to learn the lesson. In command centers and fleet headquarters, officers read the message, and they smiled. In the Terran Defense Council chambers, the new admiral of the fleet stood up. Her name was Rebecca Martinez. She had served under Admiral Chen,